100 doctors. All failed. The richest man in the city, the mafia boss everyone feared, stood powerless for the first time in his life. His son lay still, surrounded by blinking lights and lifeless machines. The air in the private hospital was thick with despair. Every specialist, every surgeon, every so-called genius had tried, and every single one had walked out shaking their heads. No cure, no hope, no miracle left to buy. But what none of them knew was that the miracle was already in the building. Down in the basement, past polished floors and golden walls, worked a man nobody ever noticed, the black janitor. His uniform was old, his hands rough, but his eyes carried something no degree could teach. Wisdom earned through pain, not privilege. And beside him, sweeping the corridor, was his 14-year-old son, quiet, watchful, with a mind sharper than anyone upstairs could imagine. When the emergency alarm echoed through the building again, even the doctors froze. The mafia boss roared, slamming his fists, his eyes red with fear. "Do something! Save him!" But no one moved. Not one dared. That's when the janitor looked up from the mop bucket, eyes narrowing toward the sound. Something inside him stirred, a pull stronger than fear. He dropped the mop. His son followed close behind. They stepped into the ward like shadows that didn't belong. The doctors glared, confused, insulted. "You don't belong here," one shouted. But the janitor's son wasn't listening. His eyes were locked on the monitor, scanning the data with silent precision. The boy whispered, "They're treating the wrong rhythm." At first they laughed. A janitor's son? Correcting doctors? Impossible. But the boy didn't back down. His voice grew steady, confident. "You missed something." He pointed to a small fluctuation on the screen, something no one else had seen. "He's not failing. He's fighting." The room fell silent. For the first time, the mafia boss stopped shouting. His gaze locked on the child, unsure whether to rage or hope. The doctors exchanged uneasy glances, but the boy stepped closer to the bedside, trembling yet fearless. He whispered, "If you keep following your charts, you'll kill him." "Let me try." The janitor's heart pounded as he stood behind his son. This was madness, but also truth. The kind of truth you can't ignore. For a moment, everything hung in silence. Then the boy placed his hand on the dying child's chest, and something changed. The machine beeped, just once. But that single sound, that single beat, shook the entire room. Nobody knew it yet. But that night, a black janitor's son was about to do what 100 doctors could not. The doctors froze. The machines flickered. And the janitor's son, a boy who had never seen a classroom filled with medicine, only the hallways of a hospital. He cleaned, stood surrounded by men who couldn't believe what they just saw. The mafia boss leaned forward, his voice trembling between fury and desperation. "What did you do?" But the boy didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on the screen, following the rhythm, that pulse that kept dancing between life and death. He whispered softly, "He's still there. You just have to listen." The lead surgeon scoffed, "Enough! Get him out." Then the alarm went silent. The screen stabilized for a split second. Everyone froze. The boy looked up, his dark brown skin glowing under the harsh white lights. His eyes filled with certainty far beyond his 14 years. "You've been fighting the heart," he said. But the problem isn't the heart. It's the signal to it. No one understood, not yet. But the janitor did. His father's eyes widened. He knew that tone, that conviction. The same voice that once told him, "Dad, I see patterns in everything." The boy moved closer to the machines, his small hands trembling slightly, but his focus unbreakable. The mafia boss watched him in silence. Around him, men who carried guns and power stood powerless before a janitor's son. He adjusted the dials gently, following an instinct no book could teach. "It's misfiring," he muttered. "The rhythm's been reversed by the wrong calibration." The surgeons exchanged confused glances. One of them whispered, "That's impossible." But then the beeping began to smooth. "One steady line." Another. And then a heartbeat. Stronger, clearer, louder. The mafia boss stumbled back, his hand gripping the edge of the bed, his eyes welling up. The same man who built an empire out of fear now trembled in awe. He looked at the boy, voice shaking. "Who are you?" The boy didn't answer. He simply stepped back, his chest rising and falling. He had done what no one else could. One of the doctors whispered in disbelief. How did you know that? The boy turned to them slowly, his tone calm. Because I don't see what you see. You look at charts. I listen to the body. The janitor placed a hand on his son's shoulder, pride and fear mixing behind his eyes. He knew they had crossed a line, a janitor and his boy, daring to outshine the educated elite. The mafia boss's guards shifted uncomfortably, their usual coldness fading into uncertainty. Power meant nothing here. Guns meant nothing here. Only truth did. And a miracle born from the hands they used to overlook. The boss leaned forward, voice cracking. Can you save him completely? The boy nodded slowly. If you trust me. And that's when something unthinkable happened. The most feared man in the city, the one who never bowed to anyone, turned toward a janitor and said quietly, Then teach me to trust. The janitor's heart pounded as he stood behind his son. This was madness, but also truth. The kind of truth you can't ignore. For a moment, everything hung in silence. Then the boy placed his hand on the dying child's chest, and something changed. The machine beeped, just once. But that single sound, that single beat, shook the entire room. Nobody knew it yet. But that night, a black janitor's son was about to do what 100 doctors could not. The air in the room turned electric. Machines hummed. Rain tapped on the windows, like a heartbeat counting down the seconds between life and loss. Every doctor had stepped back now. They were no longer in control. All eyes were on a barefoot boy in a wrinkled shirt, his tiny hands steady on the machine that had baffled 100 experts. The mafia boss could barely breathe. His empire meant nothing. His money couldn't buy what this boy was doing with faith and focus alone. The boy's voice was a whisper. The rhythm's not broken. It's scared. No one dared speak. He adjusted the frequency again, following the faintest pulse, a pattern no monitor could truly see. For a moment, the line went flat. A single haunting beep filled the room. Gasps erupted. A doctor screamed, He's gone! But the janitor's son didn't move. His lips parted just enough to say no. He's fighting. Then, a second heartbeat. Weak, but there. Then another. Then another. Stronger, louder, defying logic. The line burst back to life. Beep, beep, beep. The boy on the bed took a deep breath. A real one. The mafia boss fell to his knees. This was a man who ruled through fear, who made cities bow, now trembling before a boy who had nothing. He whispered, voice cracking, You saved my son. The janitor stepped forward slowly, eyes filled with tears. No, sir, he did. Silence filled the room again. Not the cold silence of death, but the sacred quiet that follows a miracle. The mafia boss looked up at the boy, tears streaking down his face. Why would you help me? The boy blinked slowly. Because no one helped us when we needed it. That hit harder than any bullet. The mafia boss dropped his head, shaking. For the first time, guilt burned through the armor of power. He reached into his jacket, and every guard tensed. But instead of a gun, he pulled out a golden ring. He looked at the boy's father, the janitor, and said quietly, I built my empire by taking. It's time I gave something back. He slipped the ring into the janitor's trembling hand. From now on, this family, your family, it will never want again. But the janitor only looked down at the ring, then back at his son. We don't need riches, he said softly. We just needed someone to believe a boy like him could matter. The mafia boss stood in silence. The rain outside slowed. For a moment, everything, the fear, the pain, the past, stopped. He turned toward the doctors. Tell your world what happened here tonight, he said, his voice echoing through the sterile white walls. Tell them the boy they ignored did what none of you could. The boy glanced up, eyes full of quiet strength, his hands still faintly trembling. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just whispered, He's going to live. And as the mafia boss embraced his son, the janitor took his boy's hand. Together they walked out of the hospital, heads held high, leaving behind the scent of antiseptic and awe. No medals, no news crews, just a father and son, disappearing into the night. The janitor who cleaned the floors, and the boy who cleaned a soul. That night, the world didn't change. But one man did, and somewhere in the distance, a heartbeat reminded everyone, greatness doesn't wear a white coat. Sometimes it just carries a mop.